Hi, welcome to my channel where we provide an alternative view to the common narrative. Today I'm going to talk about the unrest in Georgia and the law that they wanted to implement, and then the government finally withdrew after the unrest. So I know there has been some videos made about this, but I hope I can expand a little bit on the subject. So if you are interested, please continue watching. Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about the unrest in Georgia, which in my opinion is, I call it a highlight of idiocy. In any case, if you haven't known about this or you're not aware of this, a couple of days back, the Georgian parliament accepted a law that forces certain NGOs and printed media and other organizations to divulge their funding. And if they have more than 20% of their funding from foreign sponsors, then they have to register. That was one of the laws. And the second law that they accepted was basically an enhancement of the penalties should such an organization fail to register their foreign aid. Now, I'm not totally sure if you remember, but there was a lady called Maria Bocchini, and she was arrested in America a couple of years back on the Foreign Agent Act, and she was actually locked up and then later on deported to Russia, since he was a Russian by birth or by nationality. And the conviction of Maria was based on a 1938 law in America that basically stipulates that foreign agents or agents that are supported by foreign governments must be registered in order to how do the Americans always say, national security. Now, the law that was publicized or accepted in Georgia were actually sort of a decision between two versions. The one version, according to the government, was based on American law of 1938, and that is what they accepted. But the opposition, naturally, would twist the facts and say it was a law mainly accepted by the Russians in 2012. Well, the question is naturally who is right and who is wrong and so on. But it created unrest in the country, and this unrest lasted for a couple of days. And after 2 days, the Georgian government abandoned that law and basically scrapped it, because that's the way that they had to do it. But the unrest didn't want to stop. They now demanded that everybody that was arrested must also be released unconditionally, even if they created criminal acts. And it turns out that the instigators of this unrest were basically foreign aid NGOs, and one can understand why they actually wanted to scrap this law, because that inhibits their own way of operating. Now, I've listened to a podcast by Scott Ritter, and Scott Ritter is married apparently to a Georgian woman, and his in-laws are still living in Georgia, and he is very, very knowledgeable about the country and what has happened there. And, well, naturally, because he's aware of that, he's very upset with the matter, which I can understand. But what he actually said, some of the information that was provided, is that Georgia has a significant contingency of CIA agents. And one has to ask, what are the CIA doing in Georgia? Because that is not for the benefit of the Georgian people. That's probably to spy on Russia. But before I progress and talk a little bit about Georgia and the whole concept about that, naturally, this law was also criticized by the European countries as well as by America, and saying it goes against the democratic values, and it breaks down freedom, and it's authoritarian, and the usual narrative that comes from the West. But it's a pinnacle of hypocrisy, because the law was based on American law. It's not a new thing. It's actually a very old thing, and America has used it in the case of Maria Bikini. So again, it's like one rule for you, one rule for me. And then what I read on a couple of days later is that Bosnia, we all remember the Bosnian-Herzegovina war and the chaos or the unstable political compensation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, also now wants to implement the law, a similar law, also based on the American version. And again, the Western nations and America are saying, no, this law you cannot implement. We can do it, but not you. And then I read a little bit more about this whole story, and then find out that the European Union has done an investigation about the law, and they are now planning to implement a similar law to the foreign agent law. So basically what you are seeing is, like I said, the pinnacle of hypocrisy. Georgia, no, not you are allowed or not that law. Bosnia, no, you are not allowed this type of law, because then you cut off our influence in your country. But we are allowed to do it. We are the West, and we are America, and this is the rule-based order. Rules for you, no rules for me. Any case, it's not that any of the other commentators are talking about this, but I thought it would be interesting to know that what is really happening. Coming back to you, Georgia. Georgia has actually a fairly disruptive history. It was part of the Soviet Union, and it became independent after the fall of the Soviet Union. And again, Western nations immediately entered Georgia and tried to control it and so on. But that's not the main story. The main story is basically that in 2003, there was the Rose Revolution, instigated by American influence and funds, just like in Ukraine. And in this Rose Revolution, which was bloodless, a person with the name of Michael Saakashvili became the president. And he ruled about, I think, for 8 years or something like that. But he was a pro-Western person, puppet if you want to call it. He did some reforms and so on, and there was some economic growth and so on, but not, there was economic growth, but not an alleviation of poverty. So what this actually means is that the oligarchs grew, but not for the benefits of the rich people, but the poor people and the general population stagnated in terms of wealth. That is basically what it says. And then later on, there were some scandals, and there was some institutional torture and rape in the prisons, of which Saakashvili was later accused of, and then also a murder and abuse of power. And he was thrown out, or not thrown out, but he was replaced by the opposition. And then he fled Georgia. And then he was accused and then convicted in absentia for the crimes. But Saakashvili went then to Ukraine, the corrupt Ukraine, and there he was appointed by Poroshenko as the governor of the Odessa Oblast. He was converted to Ukrainian citizenship, and then he was placed into control of the Odessa Oblast. And it didn't last long, and then he was fired from that position as well because of his abuse of power and corruption. And then he went back to Georgia, and then he was put in prison for 6 years for the crimes he committed during his basically reign. So the Georgians should be aware of what a revolution really means and what the results were, and that the results didn't favor the population per se. So this makes this whole unrest a little bit, I cannot understand why they are doing it. At the end of the day, the new president, I just have to get a name right, Salomia Zaurabichvili. Salomia Zaurabichvili. Well, she's the president. But again, she isn't a born Georgian. Her parents immigrated to France, and she was actually born in France in 1951. And there she entered the political sphere, became ambassadors, and held various political positions according to France. And in 2004, in 2004, more or less, or before that, 2003, 2004, after the Orange Revolution, the Rose Revolution, she was the ambassador for France in Georgia. And then under the rule of Saakashvili in 2004, she, with not approval, mutual agreement between the president of France and Georgia, she was appointed, she was given the Georgian nationality and became the foreign minister of Georgia. And currently, she is the president of Georgia. Now, at the time of the unrest, she was overseas. And in the press conferences or press releases that she made, she said that she will veto this new law. So it again shows you already her background, basically intentions, and her view, and a pro-Western view. Now, Europe and so on actually criticized the new law, and it says it will basically inhibit, or not prevent, but it will make it more difficult for Georgia to become part of the EU. But Georgia hasn't been given any candidate status for Europe as well, for the EU at this stage. So the question is really arises, why are they doing everything like this when they can see the hypocrisy of the EU, when they can see what is happening to Hungary and Poland and how the EU are pressurizing them? And at this stage, I ask myself, the question is, why does anybody wants to become part of the EU? I mean, it's a declining basic economical, industrial, political bloc. And if you look at the benefits that it gave to Hungary and all the old Soviet countries, it wasn't that great in that respect. It is those old Soviet Union states basically providing cheap labor and resources to the more welfare of the European countries and being exploited by them. But even looking at the location of Georgia, it is far away from the EU bloc itself. By the west, it is bordered by the Black Sea. South, it is southwest, it's Turkey. South and southeast is Armenia and Azerbaijan. and to the north, we have Russia. So, and that means there's a huge disconnect between the EU and Georgia. So how is any benefit going to reach Georgia? Because you have to travel over the Black Sea via a port from Romania or Odessa, if you still believe that that will belong to the Ukraine, or Greece. So there is no real benefit of Georgia for the EU. But Georgia has always been near to the Russians, and most of their trades are done with Russia. But during the period of Saakashvili, who was pro-Western and was influenced and probably bribed by the Americans, he started off a war with Russia by invading South Ossetia, which led to the Ossetia-Russian War. And, well, that was 5 days, and about, I think, 50 Georgians died, soldiers died. But it was a total mess. And because of this, too, there were another problems. I'll just have to get the name again. Abkhaz Georgian war. Georgia lost basically those 2 provinces. And maybe with that, there became some animosity from the Georgians against Russia. But it wasn't a Russian war. It was the Georgians, and mostly Saakashvili, that tried to capture or suppress the Russians in South Ossetia in the name of the American foreign policy. So it was not Georgia itself, it wasn't Russia, it was Saakashvili that created these problems. Just a little bit of background. Georgia is not a big country. It's about 69,000 square kilometers and has a population of 3.7 million people, of which about, say, 1 million stay in a capital, which is, I believe, Tbilisi or something like that. Any case, and that is where the riots or the unrest happened. One actually has to ask yourself, what does democracy really mean? If Georgia has 3.7 million people, inhabitants, and say if 10,000 people were unhappy with the law and did demonstration and became violent, and the government, on behalf, in order to resolve this unrest and get the people back into control, they refuse or they nullify the law, then that is not democracy. Because it's only 10,000 people, which is very, very conservative. They probably were a lot less. Deciding for 3.7 million people what is allowed and what's not allowed. But because of violence, these people were prepared to do violence. They got what they wanted. I'm sorry, that's not democracy. What the government now should really do is hold a referendum, and then you can decide on the law, and then effectively decide yes or no, and then we have proper democracy. But another thing that Scott Ritter also said, when Scott gets talking, he gets very excited, and I have no problem with that. So I like listening when he goes. Like I said, he knows what's going on in Georgia. And he actually said or mentioned that there were about 37 or 35,000 soldiers, military. That's the size of the military of Georgia. It has no tanks. It has basically no aircrafts, nothing of any sorts of a real military. So from a military perspective, it has no value. You cannot, anybody that thinks you can attack Russia with 35,000 men without any armor or against a big country like Russia has a suicide mission on his brain. So what's the point of Georgia actually becoming part of the EU and the Americans trying to use it as a springboard or as a proxy war? That's not going to last long. You know, Russia went into Ukraine as a limited special military operation, and they refused, or they tried to prevent as little civilian casualties. They didn't do any carpet bombing and so on and so on and so forth, because they wanted to have the support of their brothers that are living there. But in Georgia, there is no such restrictions. So if Georgia would like to start a second front, as they would call it, with Russia, that would last maybe a week, and then Georgia will be destroyed. All the military will either be killed or captured, and the city, the capital, will basically be destroyed. And then why all the unrest? And then think about the law. It's like if they said, yes, I'm going to have more taxes, or going to have something that affects all citizens of the country, yes, then you have a reason for an unrest. But if you pull up to a demonstration for a law that doesn't affect you, you have no concern of it, it's like being a right-wing white suprematist suddenly having an issue with a new abortion law or gay right type of law, which you know you're not gay and you know you're not a woman, so you're never going to have an abortion, you're never going to join gays, you are a pure blood white supremacist right-wing, then why do you go and put your life at risk? Because most of the times, if you listen to certain unrest and so on, even in France, people are killed. People lose their lives. So why would anybody support this type of it? And then you can only think of is from outside influences and outside instigations, and the people that actually behind this whole demonstrations are foreign agents. And that is precisely the law, the type of instability that the government would like to prevent in future. Because at the end of the day, everybody wants peace, stability, and prosperity, and a peaceful life to grow up and to have children and grow old, and that is what people want to do. So I'm not totally sure why this thing has happened and why people are supported, but there are probably all these young woke type of people that have been influenced, and they don't. And I think in the Bible it says, "Forgive them because they don't know what they are doing." Yeah. That was, I think, when Christ was put on the cross. He told them, disciple, "Forgive them because they don't know what they are doing." But even for an advantage from the Americans, why would America even consider Georgia as a proxy or as an aircraft carrier, as they call it, a fix on the border? Because at the end of the day, they have to supply them with weapons and ammunition and so on, should a second front open up. And that has to travel through the Bosporus Strait, which the Turkish control. And if there's a war, the Turks are obliged not to allow any military vessels to enter the Black Sea. And there's the Russian Black Sea and any Black Sea fleet in any case that can prevent all this stuff. So there's no chance of resupplying or supplying Georgia of any weapons. It's also too far away to fly them there. Then the American, the Russian air defense system can be easily put up and control the whole area because Georgia is not very big. So again, from a military point of view, Georgia has no military benefit to the Americans. So why are they even instigating this? And if it goes hot and so on, then trust me, the Russians will go in there. 1 week later, everything will be destroyed. So who wants to commit suicide for a law that doesn't really affect you? Just doesn't make sense. And then the people that tell you to go to demonstrate against this law have the same law or planning to implement the same law. Surely these people cannot be that dumb. What bothers me is, not that bothers me, what I've noticed through the years is that the East Bloc countries are very big nationalist, or ethnicity plays a huge role, religion plays a huge role, numerous antagonistic type of relationships are prominent in these countries. You can look at Kosovo, which is 90% Albanians, and then you have the Serbs. You can look at Bosnia and Herzegovina, the one is Christian, the other one is Muslims. And then they want to kill each other. So, and I've seen other movies about other ethnicity in Russia and so on that also plays a huge role. So the question is, why would these people that are so ethnic orientated and nationalistic orientated go and stand and support a foreign country's intervention in their own country that will only benefit the other country and be to the huge detriment of yourself? That is really what happened. So the question still arises, or the statement I would like to make is, I don't understand these people. If I have a choice between peace and confrontation for something I don't believe in or has no benefit for me, then I will always choose peace. Even if some stuff are detrimental to me, it's a question of weighing it up against the problems that will arise, going against it. How much do I sacrifice and how much benefit do I gain? That's at the end of the day what everybody calculates it, even if you don't accept it or you don't realize it. But that's what you are doing every time you make a decision. What's the benefit for me? What do I have to pay for it? That is what we do every single day. Anyways, that's my story for today. If you like what you heard and you haven't done it, subscribe. Tell your friends if you haven't. Let your friends subscribe. Press the like button. Get the notification button. And until next time, cheers.